if they haven't been properly discipled, it's just very easy for them to fall back into old ways and just kind of turn their back on the faith that they claimed to have.
What's up, and welcome to Ordinary Discussions Podcast, where we discuss what it looks like to walk out discipleship in our everyday lives. Today we have a great guest, Shane Flory. Shane recently just finished his Ordinary Men's Group, and he's a great example of what it looks like to walk out discipleship in our everyday lives. There'll be some great takeaways in this podcast for you, so make sure you listen. Guys, thanks so much for being part of this podcast, listening, subscribing, supporting us. I ask that you just share this with your friends if you think it would be relevant. Leave us comments, do all those things. We really appreciate your engagement. Guys, thanks so much again, and I hope you enjoy this podcast. Let's do this. Hey guys, we got Shane Flory. How are you, man?
Hey, I'm good, Jeremy. It's good to see you. I don't think we've seen each other, I don't know, at least a few years.
Well, I mean, I think we've seen each other on video, but in person, we definitely have not seen each other for a couple of years.
Yeah, definitely not. And I watch your podcasts and see them on YouTube, so I guess I've seen you that way, but I don't know. It's been a while since we've been live together. It's fun.
Yeah, I agree. We talk on the phone, but seeing our faces for sure. So you're down in Tampa, Florida. I bet it's nice and cool there right now in July.
Yeah, it's 92 degrees, partly sunny, about 4:30 in the afternoon. So,
well, that's not too hot. I guess it's humidity maybe that gets you.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't often get temperature above 100 degrees, but the feels like aspect is pretty huge. I mean, going out and playing golf at these kinds of temperatures and this kind of humidity is, it's an experience.
Yeah, you poor guy. I mean, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you get to get out there.
I'd rather be playing golf in Colorado this time of year. You hit the ball a lot further up there. So
because of the thin air?
Yeah.
Does it really matter?
Oh, man, like 10% difference.
Really?
You feel like a real man up there, man. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, so a 270-yard drive is automatically 300 yards up there. So
yeah. Listen to you throwing out numbers. So Shane is a numbers guy. He is a, what is your title? You've got like 1 million letters behind your name.
No, I only have 3 letters. Ken, my partner, is the guy with the alphabet soup. Yeah, I just have the 3 most important letters, CFA. I think my title could either be Chief Investment Officer, which is a self-awarded title. I didn't earn it. I happen to run the business, so I get to call myself what I want. But indeed, I am the portfolio manager for our investment management firm, and we manage about $200 million for people and corporations and nonprofits and my church even. So that's what we do.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give a shout out. It's Elevation Capital, right?
Elevate.
Yeah. Sorry. I should know. You've managed money for me for some time. Elevate Capital Advisors, right?
You got it.
Yeah. And that's the website, elevatecapitaladvisors.com.
You got it. Yep.
Yeah, I will say Shane has a very unique approach. He is very hands-on. He doesn't just put you in a mutual fund and roll. So anyhow, I'm happy to shout out Christian businesses and people that are making money with a mindset towards our faith. So if anybody needs help financially, reach out to Shane.
Look us up.
Just go on and read his commentaries on their website, and you will be blown away by his knowledge. He's really a professional guy and great at what he does. So, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about discipleship in our everyday lives. So, making a little bit of a pivot in the podcast and getting a little more focused in this next season on interviewing people that are walking out discipleship in their everyday lives. I think that at times discipleship is a very abstract term. It's a very abstract thing. It's like, what does that even mean? So I think if we can put some examples to that, we may be able to inspire people to walk it out in their life. And it looks different for all of us, right? Like I'm going to have my brother on soon. He doesn't know that. He's coming out to visit me and he's going to do a podcast with me. So don't let me down, Casey. But he coaches, right? And so he coaches high school football, and part of his calling, he feels like from the Lord, is to invest in these young men. And so that's walking out discipleship in his life. So it's different for all of us. And I want to highlight that throughout this country with just ordinary people and some people that are probably extraordinary in ministry, but how it all started. It all starts in very ordinary ways. So I know you just led an ordinary men's group. So I'll just kind of turn it over to you. I mean, how did that kind of start for you? And And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it was something I wanted to do long before I ever actually participated in a group. So because I knew you before I was even following Jesus or trying to follow Jesus, right? And so I always knew that ordinary men was a thing. My business partner Ken led an ordinary men's group before I surrendered my life to Jesus. So I always just kind of knew it was a thing, that it was out there. And for me, um, and maybe we'll get into this more, maybe we won't, but you personally had a little bit of an impact on, I think, on me becoming a Christian. The timing is too, I don't know, it was too much timing coincidence for it to be a coincidence, I think. So, um, to me, it was just kind of a natural step where it's like, hey, I'm okay. I'm 39 years old, maybe 38. I can't remember at the time. It was 3 years ago. You said I was good at numbers, and I can't do basic math because I have a camera in my face.
Well, based on that color of your beard, you're in your 40s now.
Yeah, definitely now. Yeah. So to me, like, I just knew it was there. So when I became a Christian, it's like, okay, what is this new faith that I have? Like, to me, it's, you weren't ever going to bribe me into being a Christian. I was going to be a Christian because it's the best explanation for the scientific, logical, forensic, philosophical evidence, right? It's the most coherent explanation of a worldview that I can think of, that and if there's one that's better, I'll have to pay attention to that, because I'm here for the truth, right? I'm not here to feel good and say like, oh, I'm a Christian because I want to see my dog when I die. And like, that's just not my thing, right? Maybe that works for some people, but for me, it just wasn't ever going to work that way. And so, when my wife and I decided that we were going to put God at the center of our marriage in order to save it, it was an all or nothing thing. It was like, hey, we either believe what we're saying we believe, or we don't. There wasn't like a halfway point in the middle. Mm-hmm. And so, knowing that Ordinary Men was a thing, that it was a program, a discipleship program that kind of teaches you how to do this walk, I think, properly. It was just kind of a natural instinct for me to say like, yeah, I want to do that. And it took me a while to find a group to get plugged into, because back when I was starting it out, you couldn't just lead a group. You had to go through the curriculum first. I think that's since changed, and there's a training program, and anybody can kind of lead one now.
That's right.
But for me, I was ever since surrendering my life to Christ, I was like, I'm looking for an opportunity to get into a group, and I wanted that opportunity to get into a group because I knew that I would want to lead a group. So I think that might be a little bit of a unique way to have kind of gotten involved with Ordinary Men, maybe not. But I knew it existed through you and my business partner, and it just seemed like a no-brainer that, like, yeah, if you're going to be a Christian and you're going to really try to walk this walk, you better know what's going on. And I mean, now that I have been in church for 3 years and counting, and pretty heavily involved in that, like, I see so much need for discipleship. Like, going to church on Sunday and hearing the message, even if it's somebody who really is preaching right through the books of the Bible, right? They're not doing theme-based, topic-based stuff where they never get to the hard parts of scripture, right? I go to a church where thankfully we preach right through the word, line by line. And so eventually the hard stuff's going to come up. But that's not discipleship. It's just not the same thing. And without that discipleship, I think, I've just encountered some people, that when push comes to shove and things get hard, if they haven't been properly discipled, it's just very easy for them to fall back into old ways and just kind of turn their back on the faith that they claimed to have. And I think it's just an unfortunate consequence of not being discipled. So I think it's important.
I have to say, I mean, one of the things that builds my faith is your faith, meaning, and I mean that because you're a super analytical man. Your mind is such that you just don't take yes as somebody tells you something. It's just like, oh yeah, you told me that, I'm going to believe it. Like, you have to know for yourself, and knowing how your mind works, and knowing how you have found your faith in Christ, and really like gone all in, it builds my faith to know that like somebody that is smarter than me, that is way more analytical than me, that has turned over every stone, has come to this conclusion. Not that I needed that. I mean, I'm grounded in my faith, but it's still awesome to see that. And it's great to see somebody that you had to come to faith in that journey. I have a friend, if you're listening, I'm not going to say your name, but I played football with you in college. And I have a friend that's struggling with that very thing. He's so analytical. He's an engineer. He's a scientist. He's in science. And it's so hard for him to come to the saving grace. Like his most recent comment to me was, well, I can't just like, I can't accept that like, there's nothing that I can do to earn this. Right. It's like, I can't accept that. Yeah. And I'm like, no, that's the very thing that makes it what you can accept. Because every other religion says you have to do something to earn it. And I know that I'm not good enough to do that. Right. Yeah. I have to have something that says it's not about me. It's about something that God did for me. But without going too far down that track, I would just say, I appreciate your faith and your journey. And it's actually really encouraged me, Shane. And it's amazing to me, like you've been a believer for 4 years now.
It was April of 2021. So, I mean, really just over 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like your maturity in Christ has, it's like the bell curve. Like, it has exploded. And it's because I think when people come to faith sometimes later in life, they don't get stuck in the religion mantra, right? Yeah. It's like you're just like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do what Jesus says. He says to make disciples. I need to learn what it's like to make disciples. And dude, you're like a year and a half into your faith, and you start an OM group, right? Which first off takes guts. Like, because most people discount themselves after they've been a Christian for 40 years, but we always tell people don't. And I think you would agree, like there was no reason to discount yourself. Like you made an impact, even though there's people in your group that knew far more about the word of God than maybe you did. Yeah. And I know that because, and kudos to you, you invited your senior pastor into your group. Right? Yeah. Here you are a year and a half into your faith. You start a group and you invite your senior pastor in. I just think that's so amazing. And it's just it's such a great example of an ordinary person just saying, it's not about me. It's not about how good I am. It's just about me being faithful to what God's called me to do. And it's like quintessential. It is like the anthem of what ordinary means. And so I'm just so proud of you for those things, man.
Yeah, dude. Thank you. That is, man, those are big shoes to fill, but I'll do my best. So
they're your shoes, so they're already filled. That's true, right? I mean, nothing I said is false. Like that's what happened.
That is a true story. I mean, he was the senior pastor was the last person I invited. So full disclosure, it wasn't the first guy I went after, but he and I, he plays golf, so we end up playing golf together. And so it came up that I was doing it, and I don't know. I guess I did. I sensed that. For anybody else out there who doesn't already know this, I mean, this may be common knowledge for some of your audience, but pastors, they live in a pretty lonely spot a lot of the time, I think. Mm-hmm. I only am close with one, so maybe his situation is unique, but
no,
I doubt it. I mean, they run a big risk of like, hey, I was honest with this congregation member about my shortcomings, and now this member is coming after me. And so they're pretty guarded in a lot of ways but everybody needs that. Everybody needs discipleship. And I've heard you talk about it on your podcast a lot, where I can't remember the saying, but everybody should look like a shepherd from the back and a sheep from the front or something.
Right. Somebody might be a sheep from the front and a shepherd from the back. So you're always, a sheep is following somebody and a shepherd is bringing somebody along. And that's our journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And so not that I'm discipling my pastor in any way, shape, or form, but I mean, they need to be part, like, it's just so easy to exclude these men from things. And whether it's just simple things like, okay, we're doing fellowship, we're having dinner, we're having lunch with so-and-so. It's like the pastor is kind of like the last person on the list, because a lot of people take the mindset that like, hey, I don't want to invite the pastor because I don't want him to feel like he's working at dinner. Like he probably wants the night off with his wife. In my experience, nothing could be further from the truth. The pastor's wife even suffers because of that, because she doesn't get invited to the dinners and to the lunches and all that, because it's like, well, they don't want to put my husband to work because he works hard enough already. So like they just end up at home, and it's like, including these men and women into, groups and lunches and fellowship is like, it's not them being put to work. They wouldn't rather spend their time with anybody else than their flock anyway,
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing I learned, is just including these guys is a big deal. And I think he was very grateful. I think, they just inspired me so much that these men, many of whom have been following Jesus longer than I've been alive, right? I'm 41 now. I was 40 when I started this group. There were at least 2 men who have been following Jesus for longer than I've been alive in this group. Yet they made time at 6:30 in the morning every other Tuesday to get up, come to our meeting place in person, prepared, answered the questions, had things to talk about, discuss, had questions to bounce off other men. And I'm just looking at it like, okay, I've been doing this for a couple of years, and like you said, I jumped into the deep end, and I've been drinking out of the fire hose, whatever analogies we want to use. It's never going to end, man. It's going to be 40 years from now, and I'm still not going to have it all figured out. And I just pray that I have that same hunger and fire that these men had. It's just, I'm not going to comprehend it all in this lifetime. And so I'm just never going to run out of stuff to study and be interested in.
Yeah, a couple great points there. First off, every time I've moved or gone to a new church, and I don't jump churches. There was one time that I left a church to go to another. Just, it wasn't a bad church. It was just, I just felt like God was calling me there, and that was very, very true in my life. But then I moved out here as well. But I've always made it an effort to befriend my pastor and truly befriend them. Like make it a safe relationship, make it somebody they can talk to, and it takes time. But you would be amazed how lonely senior pastors are. They know everyone. They can't go anywhere without knowing everyone there. Yet nobody knows them, right? Very few people know them. And some of it's intimidation. Like that's why they don't get invited, because they're intimidated by the pastor. Or it's like, what if the pastor sees me having a glass of wine? Or what if he hears me cursing? Or, whatever that would be, people are intimidated. Funny story around that. So I invited my pastor from Virginia, Daniel Floyd is his name, if by any chance he would listen. And it was a poker night at my house. And he came. No, we were watching. No, it wasn't poker. We were watching college football playoffs or something. And there was a guy there, and he was just like F-bombing and this and that, right? Because not all my friends are Christians, thank God. And so he's talking to Daniel, and you're just cursing like a sailor. And then he says, "What do you do, Daniel?" And Daniel says, "Well, I'm Jeremy's pastor." And his face, like I was across the room, but I could see it happening. And his face just like completely went white, and he went, "No," and he used no effing way. And I'll never forget. I thought it was the funniest thing ever. And I talked to Daniel about that afterwards. He loved it. He was like, "Man, it's so great just to be around people and not know who I was and just be real." Because the second they found out who he was, they changed.
Everybody's different. Yeah.
Everybody changes. And so I just think if somebody's listening to this and there's one takeaway, if you're a man or a woman, befriend the pastor's wife. If you're a man, befriend your pastor, and they need you. And that's a great point, Shane. Really a great point. And I know this. Here's what's great about your story. And this is an everyday person. See, this is where I want to go with this podcast. You're an everyday person walking out discipleship in your everyday life. Like you just did what God called you to do, and He put on your heart to invite your pastor. Well, I know you made an impact on your pastor because he was recently on a call that I had, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Giving feedback on how we can be more effective as a tool for churches to use, right? To create discipleship within churches. And first off, he wouldn't have said yes to that call if he didn't believe in what we're doing. And he was singing praises on the call. So Pastor Huckabee, what's up? and so I just think it's amazing. Like it just shows that like you had impact. And I would challenge, like you say, I'm not discipling him. I don't know. I'm not sure you're not, because I know that discipleship looks like somebody ahead of you, right? But there's always an area in our lives that somebody is ahead of us. Like that was actually said in my OM group. It's like when we realize everybody we talk to is better than us and knows more and is better than us in some area of their life than we are, it makes everybody extremely interesting to us, right?
Yeah.
And it takes away pride in our lives, like, well, we're so special. And so there's part of discipleship is intentional relationship and being a friend and walking through life and companionship and partnership. So I would believe that you are doing all those things, and it may not look like, you know, you're the shepherd and he's following you, like that analogy, but I would say that you are discipling him in some ways. And I'm sure he's discipling you in many ways. So I don't think it's ever just a one-way street.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you on that. I mean, that's actually just a great mentality to take into any interaction with a new person you meet. Is like, you might not know this person, you might not even want to get to know this person. You know, you may rather be at home watching football or whatever, but if you can just like that's just something that you should take it everywhere, is be curious about people and what can you learn, even if it's somebody you know you don't like. You know, sometimes you're forced into situations with people that you're like, I'd rather not have to deal with this person.
Yeah.
But if you can take that mentality of like, what can I learn from this person? It might just be what they had for lunch today.
Yeah.
They can teach you that. You know, you didn't know it beforehand. But if you can take that mentality into that conversation, they're going to end up walking away saying, gosh, what a swell guy, you know?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's just, I think that's a good way to go about any type of conversation. So yeah, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to shift gears a little bit. And I'm hesitant to do it because it makes it sound like I'm patting myself on the back in some way or something. I'm really not. But you recently did a video for us, just a testimonial of your journey in OM, Ordinary Movement, Ordinary Men, if you're watching it and didn't know that. And you mentioned something about, yeah, I had lunch with Jeremy and like I expected to talk numbers before I know it, like we're talking about faith and life, and like we barely talked about numbers, and it was a business meeting that we were kind of meeting to talk finances. And again, this is not about me. It was more about it. What struck me was the power of an intentional conversation. You know, intentional relationship is part of being we have three core values: intimacy with Jesus, intentional relationship with others, and multiplication out into the world. And I think sometimes we think intentional relationships are only about like a deep relationship we have with someone, but I err maybe too often. I may like push people away at times, but I err at getting deep quick and getting past the surface level pretty quick. And I've just had evidence like your story, and I had like 2 or 3 other things happen in this week, and where people said some things, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of power in just being intentional in our everyday conversations. So anyhow, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or.
Yeah, dude, I mean, I'm pretty sure that there is a core concept or somewhere in the Ordinary Movement curriculum, where it discusses like you're discipling whether you know it or not. Like, are you doing it well or are you not doing it well? Are people learning how to be or how not to be?
Yeah.
Are you representing Christ well? You know, are people who don't follow Jesus looking at you and saying, gosh, if that's what a Christian's like, I sure am glad I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so I think there's a lot of that you know, that comes out, and I'm sure I'm not the only person in the world this has happened to, like you just alluded to. But yeah, I remember that conversation. I don't remember exactly all of the topics that we talked about, but I remember where it was at the Valley Club out on the back patio.
I remember the lunch, but I don't remember a thing
Yeah.
about me saying anything about faith, which is funny.
You know, the only here's a funny one. Again, I was not following Jesus at the time, everyone. So the
crazy,
one I'm sure I did. the the one thing I remember us talking about was the God-sized hole that I did not have in my heart. I remember that being like part of my, you know, my logical reasoning for why I didn't need God. Is I was like, I don't have a God-sized hole in my heart. Well, I think that's just something like a lot of people like. It's a saying that I've heard many times. Maybe everybody hasn't, but I think there's a lot of Christians out there that will try to sort of evangelize by telling people that they have a God-sized hole in their heart, and they've tried to fill it with alcohol and
Yeah.
gambling and women and,
Money, golf.
whatever.
Yeah.
They try to fill it, and it's unfillable. And that was kind of, I think I was trying to get out ahead of you and said, like, I don't have a God-sized hole in my heart. I'm pretty happy, but the truth was that I probably wasn't very happy. Like, I thought certain things were making me happy. I thought, money and having a business and being in control of my calendar and getting to play golf and, just doing whatever, smoking a whole lot of weed in Colorado, right? All these things were, I mean, that's most of the reason I moved to Colorado is because I got tired of looking over my shoulder everywhere else I lived, and saying, why is this illegal? Why do I have to worry about it? I want to go somewhere where this isn't a problem and I can just do whatever I want. So that's a real thing. And I probably thought that I was getting a great deal of happiness out of things like that. And it's like, it's like another saying where it's like people are so locked up that they can't even see the bars of the prison that they're in, like they're just so blinded. And I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody. I'm telling you from my personal experience, I was absolutely blind to how much of a slave I was to my sinful nature.
Wow.
And to the point where I was telling you, like, I don't have this God-sized hole in my heart when, okay, call it what you want, but I did not have real joy. There's no way you can understand what joy really is without God. I'm absolutely positive of that because I've tried every other way. I've tried every other way to do it. You name it, dude, I was addicted to it. And all I was a slave to all of that sin. And you don't know what joy is until you are liberated from that slavery. People thought when Jesus came that he came to free them from Roman oppression, right?
Yeah, right.
He's like, no, I came to free you from your slavery to sin. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what I freed you from.
Yeah.
It's such a bigger, more profound thing than you can ever understand until you experience it firsthand. I don't know any better way to say it, to be honest. But I that is the number one thing I remember from that conversation was the God-sized hole in my heart that I just didn't have. And I think you were like, dude, that's not what I'm saying, and that's not what it's about. I remember you being like saying
that. This is great because I don't remember. Did I wasn't alluding you had it. You were just trying to get ahead of me saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And what was my response? Do you remember?
I think you giggled a little. You're like, dude, that's not where I was going with that at all. But I was prepared. I was ready. I came to fight. I came to have an intellectual debate.
Well, that was then you realized you were with me and the intellect went out the
window. I do know this. I mean, for certain, I know that after that conversation, after that lunch, there was so I say this to my wife a lot. I was like, people don't always remember what you said, but they remember how they felt when you said it.
Sure.
Right. And I remember feeling a certain way. And then I went out and bought 3 copies of Frank Turek and Norman Geisler's book. I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
I've got it in my bookshelf.
And this is a book that a Christian named Josh gave to me back when I was 22 years old. I worked at Nationwide Insurance. We sat next to each other in cubicles, and we would just have nonstop debates all day long when we weren't on a phone call about the existence of God and where did we all come from and where did the universe start, where are we going to go when we die, where did the first life come from. And I was the atheist and he was the Christian, and we would just go at it over this stuff in a friendly way, right? In an intellectual type debate way. Sure. And I was like, man, I don't know what I ever did with my copy of that book. I don't know if I even had read the entire thing then, but I was like, I'm going to go buy a copy of that book. And so I bought one for myself. I bought one for you, and I bought one for my business partner, Ken. I wrote you a little note on the inside cover. I was not a Christian at the time. I was not intending to follow Jesus at the time, but I do remember I read at least the beginning of that book. And for the first 4 or 5 chapters of this book, it doesn't talk about the Bible or about Christianity at all. It's basic logic. Like, what is truth? How do you know what truth is? Can you handle the truth? Right. Yeah. Just
You can't handle the truth.
Where does morality come from? What about the universe? What about fine tuning? All this stuff, right? It doesn't get into Jesus and New Testament and manuscript histories until way later in the book. So there were things that I learned. They call it the roadrunner tactic, but it's just basically a way to identify self-defeating statements in philosophy. And I remember it, and I was like, I should go get that book. And I got the book and I sent it to you. I was like, hey, this might help you in your discussions with other people like me, who I was at the time, to say like,
I don't believe in what you think, but hey, this may help you.
yeah, right. This may help you get your message out. Yeah, because I don't know, man. I wasn't ever like hostile. Maybe that's not accurate. I think I probably was hostile. Not to you personally, but I think I was hostile towards Christianity in general. Like, if you gave me an in, I would try to talk you out of it because it was, what do you believe in, fairy tales and angels and people living inside a fish for 3 days? Come on, man. You're smarter than that. And I probably thought that it was possible to talk people out of their faith. I mean, which is not. You can't do it. You're not gonna talk a true believer out of their faith. I don't care how much evidence you think you have. Because they know it on a whole different level that you're never going to touch, right? People who know it
the essence of faith is belief in something unseen, right? So you can't they already exhibit the fact that they're okay with not having every answer. So you're right. I mean, it would be very hard to talk somebody out of their faith.
Yeah. So I mean, what did we discuss that caused me, I wouldn't say that I was an atheist because I could never argue for where the first life came from if it wasn't created by somebody.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Life doesn't come from non-life, and if you can believe that, you believe something way crazier than what I believe, right?
Christianity is way easier to believe than that.
Totally, and hence the title. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. It requires more blind faith to believe any other worldview.
Yeah,
certainly any atheistic or non-theological monotheism, I think, is the best answer. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about right now. But at any rate, I am analytical. I do approach things from that kind of perspective, and whatever it is that we discussed caused me to go out and buy that book. And I bought 3 of them, and I still have the copy that I bought for myself sitting up here. I have since bought at least 100 of these books and given them to people.
Yeah.
We bought them as a church and gave them away to people. I mean, I highly recommend it to anybody who ever has doubts or questions. I mean, because if I didn't have stuff like that to fall back on when I woke up in the morning and said, how do you really believe this? Like, it's just too easy if you're not grounded in the Word to have those doubts, and when they snowball, man. I mean, so for me, my fallback is always like, well, if you don't believe this, what are you going to believe?
Yeah.
You got to pick something. Yeah, we all had to come from somewhere. We all got to be going somewhere. And so what are you going to believe? And I mean, I don't know how. It just had to have had something to do with the path that I didn't know I was on yet. I mean, because 8 months later, I was surrendering my life to Christ, and my wife.
It was probably just something said, and I think it reminded me that in life, even in a business call, even in a business conversation, there's opportunity to point people to Christ, right? Yeah. You may not even I don't even remember doing it, but apparently it's just who I am, right? So I can't have a conversation and something come up and me not.
Yeah, right.
And so God speaks to me through repetition. He speaks to us all differently, but I'm certain that he speaks to me through repetition. It's happened too many times in my life. And so I heard your testimony, and then I got 2 completely random text messages. One was about a bike I was selling, from a guy in Virginia. And he started off about the bike, and then he was like, hey, I just want to thank you for, speaking with me and helping me through a really tough time in my life. It really meant a lot. This is literally 12 years ago when I was going through rehab on my Achilles, and he was my physical therapist. And all I was doing is laying on a table while he was doing rehab on my Achilles. And I guess in that moment, the same thing I did with you, I wasn't ashamed of my faith. I wasn't ashamed of Christ. I just was out there with it. I probably asked him questions that most people don't, like, hey, how's your marriage and how are your kids? Most people don't ask that question. And it just led to that. But I cannot tell you that I even was meaning to like have this impact on his life in that time. Anyhow, then there was another text. And then we talked about it today in my OM group because we were on intentional relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, man, not in a way to at all pat myself on the back, because it's really not anything that I'm doing that's special at all. It's just being intentional in our conversations and our relationships with people. And you never know. Like, I think it was a real treat for me. Like, sometimes God, he'll show you the little popcorn trails of life that you've left, and he'll give you a glimpse into something that an impact that maybe you had in your life that you never even knew you had, right? And then it just motivates you to want to do it more. It's like, oh man, that actually had an impact. Now I need to do that more. And so anyhow, I thought it was a good opportunity just to discuss that, and maybe it would encourage people as they listen that just because you're having a meeting on the golf course about business and golf, or at your physical therapist, or wherever you're at, you never know where a small conversation could lead to something much bigger.
Totally. And it reminded me of what C.S. Lewis says in chapter 11, I think, of Mere Christianity.
Great book.
He said, I actually have it on Audible, and every time I finish it on Audible, I just start it over.
Yeah, because every time you get something new. Yeah,
I wish I could internalize the whole thing, man. But I do have a fair amount of it, like where I don't have it verbatim memorized, but I certainly know where to go find stuff when it comes up, like what just happened with you. But it reminded me of what he says in chapter 11, where he's talking about chapter 11 is the new men, ironically enough, which are Christians, and he says they love you more than other men do, but they need you less. And I think that's what probably came through in our conversation, because it wasn't that you were evangelizing me or trying to convert me or telling me I need to be a Christian or I was going to go to hell, or you weren't trying to scare the hell out of me as a lot of people's approach is, which would never have worked with me. I mean, never, right? I tell people all the time, it's like, don't do the hell and damnation thing with people like me, because they will just resist. Just to resist, they will resist. For me, what would have worked better was the joy aspects.
Yeah.
And like the freedom from the actual slavery that I didn't know I was in. That stuff would have worked way better. Probably wouldn't have worked at all until the time was right, but it would have worked way better. But I think that's, I think that's just, your nature is to, it just oozes out of you. Like when you really believe what we believe, it's impossible to spend 5 minutes with somebody who's a real follower of Jesus and not have it come up in some way. And, when I play golf and I get paired up with like a random group of guys or something like that, I'm always thinking to myself, like, how will these guys know at the end of this 4-hour round, how will these guys know in no uncertain terms that I am a Christian without me telling them that I'm a Christian? What can I do? And my pastor, Randy, has taught me many ways, which is, when you hit a bad shot, you say, "Oh, glory," instead of what I would normally say. And, or just anything, thank God for this beautiful weather, or there's a million ways to live out what we believe in. And just doing it intentionally, like not, of course it's going to happen by accident if you really believe it. But also intentionally just doing it and saying, like, there's a purpose behind living your life in a certain way and displaying what it means to have Christ in you. Just, forget the words. It's all about the actions.
Yeah. It reminds me, you said it's just in our nature. When you follow Jesus, it just oozes out of you. It reminded me of our keystone verse of Acts 4:13. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized they were unschooled, ordinary men, they took note and realized that these men had been with Jesus. I think when you're spending time with Jesus, and I pray this for you, Shane, I pray this for me, I pray this for anybody listening. It's like, man, when you spend time with Jesus, like every environment you enter, people should realize that you've been with Jesus. And I think they do. I think they do.
Well,
as long
and
as we're
of course,
walking out.
oh, of course, we always have our moments where if somebody saw it, they would be like, "Whoa, whoa, what Jesus is that?" So
Yeah, that's
I'm not.
normally.
I don't walk on any water. I promise you.
Oh,
You can
yeah.
ask my wife Chanel, and she'll give you plenty of examples where I'm not very intentional about
Yeah, we're
doing
not
that.
having
So
my wife on this podcast for good reason. Hey, speaking of your wife, what's going on there? I hear there's some interesting news there.
yeah, some developments that have happened in the past. I think just yesterday, as chance would have it. Yeah, so when I was leading my ordinary men group, I was very focused, and of course you discourage this in the curriculum, but I was very focused on like, man, if I don't have at least one of these men decide to lead their own group after this, then I
Yeah.
have not done my job, and I will feel like a failure, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
though that's not the case, and I get all the reasons why, like it is such a huge compliment, or would be such a huge compliment, to get a message from one of my men and say like, "Hey, I'm putting my own group
Yeah,
together."
we
Like
all
I would
want
be
to see
very
that,
proud.
right? We all want to see
Yeah,
that. Yes.
I'll be very proud if that comes to pass, and I'll be disappointed if it doesn't. That's the human in me. But what I never thought of, I just never it never even hit my brain was that my wife was watching.
Mm.
That yeah, sorry if I get a little emotional about it.
No
That
apology.
happens, but um, I just never thought that she was paying, that it was rubbing off on her, that she was seeing a difference in, just, hey, I'm preparing, I'm getting ready, I'm intentionally trying to invite these men to go to lunch and spend time together one evening every other week, and like just developing these relationships and digging into the spiritual aspects of faith by reading Watchman Nee's book, The Spiritual Man, cover to cover, and really diving into a couple of the chapters as the curriculum gets you to do, and the normal Christian life. These books are fantastic for
They're
anybody who hasn't
fantastic
read
books.
them. I mean, just
Fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
really. And so yeah, yesterday, I mean, it was we had talked about on Sunday, she was going to order The Spiritual Man because we're in Galatians and we're talking about the spirit versus the flesh and how they're at war with one
Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
And I'm citing I'm citing Watchman Nee like every 5 seconds, right? And I'm talking like I know what I'm talking about, which I don't. I'm just regurgitating
No,
things
I
that
think you
Watchman
do.
Nee
I
know.
think you do.
And but anyway, she signed up yesterday, I think, to go through the training to lead her own ordinary
I
women's
know.
group.
Incredible.
And I'm telling you, man, like, not that I won't be proud if one of the men decides, uh, for my group, decides to start their own group,
Mm-hmm.
but like, it just never occurred to me, going back to how we started this conversation, like who was watching and what they were paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, not that I don't know, not that I'm not discipling my wife, but I think we disciple each other in a lot of ways. I've learned so much from her on this walk. She's always bringing me something new, like, hey, did you know this? Did you ever think about that? And I'm just like, whoa, that's awesome, and so I guess it works the other way too. And so I am excited to see what she does with an ordinary women's group. I think it'll be great for her and whichever women it is that end up being able to participate with her. And it's an avenue I never considered, you know would even be a thing. And man, it is humbling to say the least, like
Yeah.
very cool.
It's a beautiful thing to see. When we text, I was like, yeah, I was so excited. Um, yeah, it's a testament of you. And I know you'll want to, not accept this, but it's a testament of your walk. Like I said, the change that you've had in your life. I mean, you're a different man than you were 3 years ago. I mean, first off, you're immediately different when you accepted Christ. We all know that, right? You're a new man, but you truly are a different person. You impress me. And she saw that. And I will say, what's interesting about that is there's a great lesson there too, is how often our spouses are watching us when we don't even know. Like this whole thing, this whole movement didn't start out as ordinary movement. It started out as ordinary men, and it was just a men's group. And I had wives come to me and say, I mean, not a wife. I had wives come to me and say, man, I see what's happening in my husband's life. I see what's happening in his friend group. I see this bond these men have. I want that for me. Like, I want that for my release. And so that's how ordinary women got started, from that very thing of wives seeing their husbands. And so it's a very similar example of what's happening in your household. And man, I couldn't be more proud of you. As I hear you speak, I say often that we judge, and I think we could even judge you. If we were judging you based on this, you would still excel. But we judge Christians, their maturity, based on how much they know, right? It's like, oh, that person's a really good Christian. They really know the Word of God. And I challenge that to say, well, I judge it based on how faithful they are of what they know, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're a real testament to that. Like, you hear something, you do it. God puts something in front of you, you walk it out. You're so hungry for the Word. So like, you're not just one way or the other. It's not, you just don't know. You don't just know a little and do what you know. It's like you do with what you know. And then you're like, so, I mean, just listening to you talk, I'm blown away with your knowledge. And anyhow, I'm just really proud of you. And I know you don't need to hear that. I'm not your father, but I am. I'm super proud of you. And I'm honored, to call you a friend and just see the growth in your life. I mean, it's really impressive what's happened in the last 3 years. And I'm just so glad we did this podcast, because I don't think there's anybody that can listen to this and not be challenged, if they've been in their faith for a long time, to watch you and see your life and say, man, Shane's been a Christian for 3 years and look at what he's doing. Or somebody that's new to faith and wouldn't watch what's happening in your life and say, man, that could be me. So I think you're walking out a great example. I know nobody's saying you walk on water. Nobody's saying you're perfect. No, we're not saying that about me either, obviously. But you are a great example of what it looks like to be an ordinary man. And I just thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I know we got to get going. I wondered what the heck we were going to talk about on this thing, and here we are. I could do another 45 minutes, but
I know. We'll do another podcast.
There's a few people that I would say, like, you're a major influencer on me leading up to my conversion, if you want to call it that, or my surrender. I prefer to use the word surrender. Ken Armstrong, my business partner, was a major influence, just seeing how he led his family and the way that he behaved with integrity and that he just loved Jesus. So that was a big influence on me. Josh, the guy who gave me that book all those years ago, I looked him up on LinkedIn. This is so from age 22, probably, when he gave me that book, to age 38 when I surrendered my life to Christ. So that's how long it took for him to have the impact he was trying to have. And dude, we've reconnected and I stay in touch with him. He's into apologetics like I am.
Wow.
And it's just, we're always sending texts. Hey, did you see this? Did you read that? Recommend this book or that book. So, I think he was trying to have that impact, but man, it took a lot longer than he wanted it to. And so I have great thanks to Josh. But most of all, dude, I would not have ever even thought to become a Christian, I don't think, without my wife saying, look, our marriage is over. And the only way I can see to save it is if we put God at the center of this relationship. Wow. I don't think there's any other way. And, that she was not a very likely person to make that recommendation at the time. She wasn't a Christian either. Yeah. And so it really caught me off guard when she said that in April of 2021. And I took some time to very seriously consider what the implications of that were. And after thinking about it, and we decided, like, yeah, well, look, if we're going to do this, we better be serious about it. Otherwise, it's just not going to fly. My wife is the number one reason that I am a Christian, and I hate to think about where I would be without her. So major influences in my life right there, and I didn't want to end this without thanking each of those people. So thank you.
Well, man, you're an inspiration. So keep up the fight. Keep up your discipleship making, and let's figure out another topic to talk about. I think we should get into some of these deeper topics that you wrestle with. I think it'd be a fun podcast. I won't be a lot of help. I can just kind of keep it moving, but I'd love to hear more of your thoughts. So we'll have a follow-up after this in a couple months. So
all right, man. Okay. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much, Shane. Guys, thank you for watching and listening to Ordinary Discussions podcast. We appreciate it. Until next time, let's do this. See ya.